Hello, this is Math with Beth, and we are going to do functions and talk about their domain and range. So, how to tell if something is a function. So, it can look a lot of different ways. These are graphs and these are just a set of points, but that alone does not tell you if it's a function or not. What tells you if it's a function is if every x value goes to exactly one y value. So, what does that look like on a graph? It means if you draw a vertical line and you hit two different points, that's bad because that means that one x value went to this y and also this y. So that makes it not a function. So that's called the vertical line test. So if I draw vertical lines, it doesn't matter where I draw one, I will never hit more than one point with this graph. So this is a function. If I draw vertical lines here, I'm good, not good. So not a function. So the vertical line test helps you do it when you have a graph. If you don't have a graph, then you just have to look and make sure that this x never goes to a different y other than 3. So basically, look if your x's repeat, because if 2 went to 3 and then later 2 went to something else, that would be bad. So 2, 1, 3, 4, they're all going to something different. So this one is fine. But here, you see that 1 goes to 4 and then it also goes to 2. So that makes this one not a function. And then finally doing the same thing, but with a mapping. So this is just another way to show what the points are. So 1 goes to 4. So these would be like your x's and your y's. 2 goes to 6, and then 3 goes to 6. Two different x's are both going to 6. That's fine. We just don't want one x to go to two different y's. So this mapping is fine. But over here, because 1 goes to 4 and then 1 also goes to 6, that's a problem. So that is how you tell if it is or is not a function. So now, if we have a function, let's talk about the domain and the range. So the definition of domain is it's the set of all possible input values or x values that can be used in a function. And a range is a set of all of the output values or y values that we can use. So basically the domain is the x's and the range is the y's. So if all you have are a list of points, your domain is also going to be just a list of numbers. Usually you'll write them in not alphabetical order, in numerical order. So I would say 0, 1, 2, 4, because those are all of the different x values being used. And then for the range, it would be 1, 3. There's another 3, so I don't need to write it again because I'm just listing the different ones. And then 8. So a domain and a range can have different values, different amounts of values. There were 4 domain numbers, but there was only 3 because one of them repeated. Now, graphs are trickier to write the domain because I'm not going to just list out all of the x's because there's a million of them, right? Because I have decimals and fractions being used here. So I'm going to use interval notation, which means I'm going to use either a parenthesis or a bracket and explain the smallest and the biggest x and y value being used. So for domain, and I like to use a pencil so I can really see, coming from the left, what is the very first number being used in the domain? And it's an arrow, which means it's going to keep on going more and more and more and more left. So there is no very smallest number. It comes from negative infinity. And then let me see what the very largest x value is. Same thing. I hit another arrow, which means it's going to go to the right forever. So if you have an arrow going left and an arrow going to the right, we're using every single x value there is, and that's how you write it. The domain is from negative infinity to infinity, or you could say it's all real numbers. Now the range is going to be different because if I come from the bottom, because range is y values, right? So we're doing the bottom to the top. I'm not hitting an arrow here. I'm hitting an actual number. So there is a smallest y value and it is -1. And since I hit it exactly, I need to use a bracket to say that that -1 is part of the y values, comma, what's the very largest one? I hit an arrow. So -1 is the smallest, but there is no largest because the arrows mean it goes up forever. So let's see what changes in this next example. Domain, I hit an arrow and I hit an arrow. So the domain is going to be the exact same as the last one. But the range is going to be different. From the bottom, I hit an arrow, which means it's going down, down, down forever. So I'm coming from -infinity this time and going up until exactly here, which is 2, bracket. So with parentheses, you're always using parentheses with the infinities. And then you're also going to use parentheses if there's ever a case like this where it's an open circle, which means I don't hit that number exactly. I get really, 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 really close to it. So let's do the next one. Domain. From the left, I hit an arrow. That means I'm coming from -infinity. Yes, we go up and then down, but I don't care about that. I care about the very largest x value. So left to right. So arrow to +2, but because it's an open circle, I still use a parenthesis. And then for my range, I hit an arrow. So coming from -infinity, I don't care about that open circle because it goes all the way up to +1. And because we hit it and it's not an open circle, I use a bracket. All right, let's do 2 more to get the hang of this because it is tricky. So this one from the left, I do not hit an arrow, but it's an open circle. So I'm going to use parentheses for that -3. And then it goes all the way to +3, but I use a bracket because it's a closed circle. For my range, my very lowest y value is -1, but it's an open circle. And then the y values go up to +2, bracket. This one's the trickiest one because there's some gaps and sometimes it looks like there's a gap and there's no gaps. So we might have to list more than one section. So we'll see. Domain, definitely I can say it's coming from -infinity, so that's fine. But I need to list any gaps, and it looks like there is a gap here, a break in the graph. So how about here? I'm coming from the left where there is an open circle. That number is covered up here. So I don't need to worry about that. So really there's no break in the graph until here. So I'm going to say from -infinity to 0 is my domain. And then there's a gap. So you use the union, the U, to say this is my domain. And then also this is. So I have to explain this section, which starts at 2 and goes to an arrow. So +2, arrow. So that's showing the 2 sections, this section and this section. For the range, definitely coming from -infinity. And again, there is a gap here. So I'm going to have to say the same type of thing I did before and use 2 separate sections. So -infinity to +1. And I use a bracket because even though there's an open circle here, there's a closed circle here. So the 1 is being used. But then there's a gap. So I need my U. And then even though this is a section of the graph, do you see that there's only one Y value being used there? It's just 2, right? Every single one of these points is using 2 for the Y. So here's how you do it when it's just a number. You just kind of do the squiggles to say -infinity to 1, all of these are being used, and then also 2. So that one was definitely the trickiest one. Maybe rewind and try it again to see if you can do it by yourself. And I hope that helped. Let me know if you have another example you would like to see. You can leave a comment or send me an email. See you next time.